Second in 3, 2. All right, we're live.
Good
Welcome,
evening, everyone.
Yep.
And we're in Twitter Spaces. So welcome to the people listening on the replay. And I'll hand over to Mark Angelis, our host.
Thank you, Michelle. Welcome, everyone. This is May 31st of 2023. We are the Web 3x3. This is your weekly insight into the business side of blockchain. This week, we'll be focusing on can we blockchain government spending? Right? Blockchain, which offers unparalleled ability to track and monitor anything, even government spending, provides us an accountability tool, right? For the government, I'm talking. Will this accountability tool be used in this manner? And we're going to talk about how Web3 is not just altering business, but actually the functioning of government. I'm joined, as always, this week by my lovely co-host, Michelle Peterson-Clark.
Hi, everyone.
Queen, right? And Mike Neubauer, your ops guy.
Good afternoon, good evening.
All right, so we were just chatting beforehand real fast for those who care that there's I call them memes. I don't know what to call it, but there's content going around the internet around in an AI world. You can't tell what content online is human made and which is not. We're already there. And so that opens up the concept, conceptually, of human required digital signatures on the content for tracking what content comes from where. This is a conversation happening in the cyber circles where people are concerned the anonymity of the internet could theoretically be requested to be removed by the users because of this AI thing. That is not the topic of our discussion, but Mike, you had a quick comment on this.
Yeah, I mean, when we discussed that whole AI concept earlier, it was apparent that there's going to be elements that are going to be treated as gospel truth when it really isn't, right? So what's it going to take to prove if there are fingerprints on a specific piece of content that's posted, whether it's AI generated or actually human generated, whether that's a newsletter, a blog post, in most cases now a video or a voice recording. I mean, it's getting more and more advanced very, very quickly here. And, I hate to use the term regulation because I know that's just, playing with fire. But, the reality is it's going to take a massive lawsuit in order for these signatures to ultimately become fair game and be the deciding factor on whether content is authentic or not. I mean, copywriting issues, plagiarism issues, just slander and libel issues. I mean, all of these are definite things that are going to happen in some way, shape, or form, whether it's malicious or not. I mean, I think that, people try to take advantage of these types of technologies once they come out. And, we've seen this happen very recently even in the Web3 NFT space.
Michelle, what do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? We've talked a lot, haven't we, about how big players, little players are kind of moving around the deck chairs on the Titanic at the moment. What's going to happen? Who's going to be the one, left without a chair when the music stops, using lots of analogies. But, it's just, there's a lot more is going to happen before we actually get to the point where there's a settlement and some kind of normality or normalcy return is in the space.
Totally agree. So I'm going to jump us into the first topic, if that's okay with everyone. Again, we're here to talk about can blockchain government spending be in the cards? This article comes to us courtesy of our ops guy, Mike. It's a piece called On Government and Blockchain, and Mike's story's focus was around it should be mandatory for governments to blockchain their own spending, and that imagine if you could get hundreds of thousands of eyes on how we're running the country, whichever country you're in. That would be an interesting thought. Mike, I'll let you lead the conversation here.
So my wife works for a Fortune 200 company, right? Publicly traded. And she works in the finance department at the headquarters. She's a senior financial analyst there. Her job is to generate reports and give specific information on costs, revenue streams, everything that's done on a quarter by quarter and an annual basis to provide to the shareholders and to the SEC. There's very specific protocols that are in place for every dollar and cent that is spent and comes into that company. All of it is auditable through those documents. So they need to be accurate. They need to be easy to digest and easy to read. Tremendous amount of time and effort is put in there. For That's just for the investors and the people associated with that organization. Now, expedite that to a country. Now you have everybody who is paying into the system, whether it's through taxes, whether it's through other incentive programs or contracts. You're paying into a system. You should have that same transparency on where all those dollars are spent. We've said this here, arguably 28 episodes ago, that this technology isn't going anywhere, and the first application should really be to refine it for government purposes. Why? Because the government doesn't produce anything. Right? The government is not an entity that is sustainable to provide for itself. It relies on people feeding into this massive machine in order for that to operate efficiently. So the people that are feeding that, whether again, it's through contracts, tax dollars, whatever incentive programs you have working with the government, you should have an opportunity to know where those dollars are being spent. And more importantly, hold those people accountable for where they say they're going to spend those dollars versus where they actually do. And that's where blockchain really comes into play. So there was a couple pieces in this article that I think I really want to highlight. The first is this type of transparency actually makes government entities run in fear, right? Because they can get away with saying, hey, we're going to allocate $1 million to infrastructure. Okay, well, what does that mean? Now, if they had to give a detailed line-by-line item on where exactly those $1 million went, what the bids were on those contracts, there would be a whole different discussion on the types of budgets that they propose. The second piece of this is that the standardization of the information can lead to really interesting dashboards and user interfaces for people to access that information. Again, we use the concept of blockchain as this digital ledger, this digital, record-keeping system. If that system is consistent at each stage of the moment the money comes in until the money is spent, meaning you have the ability to audit every step of the way, you can pull those assets and actually provide a different user interface using the same data sets. And that, I think, is one of the more overlooked components of what we're talking about with blockchain, especially with government. People, especially contractors, can pull that information and say, hey, this is what's being spent. This is how I can provide a service for my clients and showcase how I'm associating that with government entities.
Mike, before I pour cold water all over that, I'm going to ask Michelle to comment.
Like, it's lovely to want to live in Disneyland, Mike, but it's never going to happen.
I don't want to live in Disneyland.
Well, actually, I mean, Mike raises a great point. I don't think Mike. I don't disagree with you. You're right.
I don't disagree that it should happen, but it is never going. Well, I don't think in our lifetime anyway. Maybe when the world changes a bit, a couple of 100 years, it might. But I just think that the current group of politicians in any country, and it's not just America or Europe or Australia, where I'm from, I just don't think the current group of people that we have that represent us in these forums at the moment would ever be prepared to be as transparent as this would make them.
And so here's my comment.
Go ahead, Mark.
Go ahead, Mike. You can respond.
No, go. Because I have a really good comment on how that can expedite, but go ahead.
No, I want to hear it, please.
No, I mean, it's got to start at a lower level, right? It doesn't necessarily need to start at the federal level. You can start this at a local HOA association or a local school board. Anybody that has a proposed budget.
They'll do that.
And then it can scale from there. If it could work there, why can't you just scale it, right? So if you want to talk about a national endeavor, I mean, we talk about Hong Kong and we talk about Abu Dhabi and all these, magical Web3 and crypto havens, right? Like, why can't they put their crypto money where their mouth is and implement that in their system? But I think to start off, a local library could easily implement this. They're given a budget. Where does that budget go? It's transparent. You could take it from there. It works in that component, bring it to the school board. It works in the school board, bring it to the local municipality. Local municipality, bring it to the county. Let it grow. Let the technology evolve over time as well. But I think it's also going to encourage more of these interfaces, which makes people aware that this type of information is now readily accessible.
So I'll tell you a quick story. Years ago, I owned a piece of property in Florida, actually, where the board, which I was the head of at the time, condo complex, the guy that was managing the property was doing all the repairs on the building for years, for decades, apparently, on his personal credit card because he gets the points, right? The credit card points, which is totally illegal. And my point is, when you get to the blockchaining technology thing, you got to replace blockchain technology with the terms power and control. And so the way government really works is politicians promise whatever program, right? X dollars to X group. The central bank eventually ultimately prints that money, right? No country, including America, especially America, lives below its means. And so when it comes to stripping the politicians of their ability to make promises and the Fed of its ability to print money, which is what blockchaining, the money does, not only will it never be allowed, in my opinion, they'll actually make it illegal to do that. Nobody wants to see the hand in the cookie jar.
That, again, is really where the voters, especially in this country, should have that final say on who supports those types of agendas. Again, I'm not suggesting we jump into this, with 2 feet at this moment. I don't think the technology is adoptable at this point, but we have the foundational pieces in place to start really pushing for this. I also thought that, 25, 30 years ago, politicians being able to pump a message out on a means of communication that could reach billions of people at any moment, at any time, whether they're on the can or whether they're sitting at breakfast in the morning, all that is very possible right now using a platform like Twitter. In fact, it's almost become a political engine for these people to communicate with people like that. It used to be on the news. It used to be in news articles. Now they can just bypass all that and communicate directly with people. Some of them do it for good. Some of them don't. But again, these are all evolutions in the technology that I think can really hold certain politicians' feet to the fire. And when you're dealing with money, now you really got a few more people's attention.
But Mike, if I'm a disenfranchised group, whomever, just take your pick, and some politician is promising me some benefit because I feel like my folks deserve it, and that could be gender, it could be race, it could be economic in terms of my work, it could be anything. But in any case, I don't really care where the money's going to come from. I just know Obama's going to give out free phones to the disenfranchised, or Donald Trump is launching a space force, or whatever. I don't care where the money comes from. I just know, yeah, that sounds great. So ultimately, you're putting the control in the hands of the people. I agree, which goes along with the people now have to manage their own finances for the country, right?
I disagree with that. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. Like, if you ask 100 people, 99 of them will say that politicians are all corrupt. There's a reason for that. That 100th person is the politician. Right. So he's going to sit there and defend, himself and everybody that he's associated with. But if you have the ability now to literally hold people accountable for spending money that is not theirs, I mean, this is the economy of scale that will work in a democratic society. The minute that you are spending money that I think it was Thomas Sowell who said this, that he gave an analogy, like if we go out to eat and I buy you lunch with my money, like I'm going to be pretty selective about what I eat because I know I'm spending my money. Now, if we go out to eat and you say, hey, Mike, I'll buy you lunch, I'll still be pretty selective because I don't want you to break the bank open for me. But if I take you out to lunch and I spend Michelle's money, now I don't.
Right. So Michelle, I agree with what you're saying theoretically, but Michelle will probably know this better than I. But in the UK, they're talking about price caps on food right now because of inflation. This is the equivalent. This is where you get to when you have to live within your means. And this is not a shot at the UK. This is because America is clearly not doing this. But like the minute you blockchain it, now it's accountability time.
Well, I mean, look at what just happened here. They voted to raise a debt ceiling on a debt that's completely outside of the realm of reality, right? So they keep increasing the debt limit on a credit card, but they keep spending twice as much as the debt limit, right? So this is a recipe for collapse and disaster, but you got nobody sitting there asking, like, where is this money going? Can we see an audit of where this money actually is being spent? Or are we just going to get headlines that say, hey, X amount goes to, infrastructure?
This is the old story of the army that orders like $40,000 hammers or $10,000 toilets. You remember this, Ols?
Yep.
I don't know. Like, Michelle, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think this is something that could happen?
Well, I mean, I like Mike's idea of that sort of lower tier start. So, your local library or your PTA or, those things. Although at the moment you would have to say that type of thing's too complicated for them to do, as in Web3 wallets and how they'd do it and whatever. But let's assume that some type of entity is created that enables it to be done more easily, like a QuickBooks, but on Web3 kind of thing. Then, I think that it is possible at the lower level. I just find it really difficult to believe that in the upper echelons of, and like we have in Australia, we have 3 tiers of government. We have federal, state, and local. And each of the states, maybe you might eventually get to states, but I can just never see the federal government implementing this, and certainly not here in the UK or in America anytime soon. When it might have been a joke for me to say it before that, it'll be 100 years or 200 years or whatever, but I just can't imagine that it would happen before that in America particularly.
One comment on that, Michelle. I agree with you, but the fact is these are eternal technologies. So Mike does raise a point in that eventually some generation is going to, let's just say 4 generations from now, people will start to ask the question, well, wait a minute, everything's been blockchained. Everything's been tracked. We still don't know how much the army costs the government, any country. So that
that article does bring up valid points of confidentiality in certain cases, right? Like maybe there is information that you shouldn't disclose, like how much defense spending you're allocating on certain areas, right? Like there needs to be some sense of disclosure, but again, it's got to be better than the system that's in place now. So I'll leave it off with this: the more they fight this component, the more skeptical people should become aware of what they're trying to hide, right? Because that is really what's at play here. It's our money being played with other people. And that's always been the case. You vote people in to spend the money in whatever, social engineering or social, programs you want to support in whatever, ideology you have. But again, this is just merely a validation that what you're voting for is actually being spent in the right direction.
That's a good point. Good point. I'm going to take us to story 2 here, and this is
going to. Can I just say quickly before that, the article I've just posted it in the link, in the thread to the Twitter Spaces. So if people want to, if they're listening to this later, they can look for the article in there.
For reference, this is from threadreadapp.com. Again, the article is called "On Governments and Public Blockchains." Mike, it was a great spot. I think that this is
cool.
As always, we seem to be a little bit ahead of the conversation out there going on right now in the blockchain world. And I think that the folks that matter will start to realize this in the years ahead of, wait a minute, blockchaining public spending. That's a concept I've never heard before, to be honest with you, Mike. And we talk about this stuff all the time. So, good spot. I'm going to make my story very brief because I think it ties into Michelle's, and that's a lot more meat on that one. But for those who aren't aware, Nike has a Web3 platform. And there's an article in cryptonews.com called "Nike's Web3 Platform Surpasses $1 million in Sales." So the name of their platform is .swoosh. And the .swoosh platform, again, it's Web3 only. It sells NFT sneakers, basically. It's generated over $1 million in sales in the first 2 weeks it's been launched. So it's May 15th is when they came live. When there's $1 million plus in 2 weeks on any platform from a major company, you can bet your bottom dollar that they're going to be putting a lot more focus, emphasis, and resources into that, and there'll be copycats, right? What is New Balance doing if Nike's making free money here? So I really think that this is the reason I picked this story. Was just we've seen people dipping toes in where coffee cards and rewards programs for Starbucks. This is actually real money. $1 million every other week. That pays for salaries. That pays for R&D. So I'm curious your guys' thoughts, and then we'll roll this into your story, Michelle.
Should I go first?
Sure.
So, it's a nice little cash grab for Nike, isn't it? Now, originally,
Cash grab.
yeah, well, I mean,
Keep going.
and I will talk about, don't get me started on loot boxes, but essentially for the people listening, it was you were given a mystery box, for want of better words, and you actually don't know what kind of sneakers in the box you get. So ultimately, you could get a $50 pair of sneakers, or you could get a $50,000 pair of sneakers, and as in not even the real sneaker, it's a digital rendition application of it. Now, granted that Nike didn't sell them for very much. They were sold for $19.82 because it is one of their early collections, and that was released in 1982. So, that's pretty cute that from a marketing perspective, as a content marketing queen, selling them for $19.82 is a really cool idea. I like that. I like the fact that Nike are thinking up new ways to get into the space and get people interested in the space. And obviously, $1 million in 2 weeks is, a chunk of change for them to be bringing in. I don't think that they can do that every week, Mark, but, maybe they will.
Well,
I don't know.
just to put numbers on this, at $1 million, $20 a pop, that's only like 50,000 Nike fans. That's not a lot of people worldwide. I think that they can do this. I mean, I'm not saying they will right off the bat, but they're generating numbers from not very many people considering the scale of that brand.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Mike, what do you think about this whole concept? And we'll hit loot boxes in a second because that's great.
Yeah, we'll link it to the loot box part of the discussion later, but like somewhere there's a series of successful NFT projects that launched almost a little over a year and a half ago that are laughing when people say that $1 million in a week is a lot, because they pulled in $30 million in 15 minutes, right? So I think Nike, once again, is somewhat late to the game, but it's showing the model of what this NFT collection could be. And for them, it's this digital collection of, tapping into people's, I guess, history and memories about launching these types of shoes and getting that into what they call this digital collection and this digital collectible edition. Whether they sustain this over a period of time is yet to be seen. I think that they need to not lose sight of adding value to those who have supported this on the front end. A low price point is definitely good. They still have barriers to entry issues. They launched this on Polygon. In fact, it's still minting, but now I think you have to have direct access and get approved on a wait list in order to mint additional ones. I think, again, this is just proof of a company dipping their toes in this space. I think that they are going to see what kind of value and what kind of response it generates, and take it from there. But if they can link this to sponsorships with different athletes or potential discounts on different items at specific locations, sponsorship of particular events and access to those events, now we're starting to talk about a real utility case, somewhat similar to Starbucks.
I want to jump this right to the loot box conversation because I know, Michelle, you've been writing content around this. For those who aren't familiar, a loot box is essentially an in-game treasure chest, right, for want of a better term, and you don't know what's inside of it, and that therein lies the issue. There's a game programming that goes into whether or not there's something good or bad in there, and people spend money to open it up, much like the scratch-off lottery tickets, except that really is randomized, and in a game, there's code. So you can control outcomes. And that's not necessarily happening, but that is the argument. So loot boxes are basically, they're unregulated, gaming items. The legality is being debated, and the game mechanics are very similar to gambling. Similar enough that people are saying there needs to be regulation, right? This would be specific to minors playing games like, Roblox or any of those adventure games where you have better weaponry or armor. And so, Michelle, I know you've got thoughts on this. I'd like you to lead this conversation.
So I had someone on LinkedIn last week posted about the Nike drop. and the loot boxes and how fantastic it was. And my comment to them on their thread that they wrote in LinkedIn was that, you know, I think it's great that Nike is into, you know, going into Web3. It's terrific because it exposes perhaps different people that might not have had exposure because they're, you know, Nike fans or whatever. And that's fantastic. But loot boxes is not the way to do it. And the reason why I think loot boxes is not the way to do it is that, you know, and I know that adults do play games too, but essentially gaming is a younger person, child occupation for the most part. I think probably under 25s would, you know, between, I don't know, 10 and 25 would be the demographic of the people that play video games and, you know, console games the most. And, you know, like they are not the people that are going to run, you know, the majority of businesses or those of us that have businesses now that want to transition into Web3. And the reason why I don't like loot boxes, well, for lots of reasons. I do think it's gambling. You know, there's been so many studies. I had hoped that I was going to finish my article by tonight and have it posted, but I went down the loot box regulation or not, gambling or not rabbit hole, and so I'm still doing my research on it. But it definitely gives the dopamine hit to you. You know, like I have a kid that plays FIFA, and you know, when you unfurl, I don't know what even, unpack the packs, you know, which player have you got? Have you got this? You know, I've had him call me and go, mum, I won't look, just press the button to unroll the pack. And he hopes that he'll get a Messi or a Ronaldo or whatever. So FIFA have been doing it for a long time, but Overwatch was probably the first one of the really big major games that started doing it. And interestingly, after the lobbying and all of the discussions and inquiries into whether or not loot boxes is gambling or not, the latest release of Overwatch does not have loot boxes in it anymore because they felt that that wasn't a good thing to do. Now, so that was a big, long-winded, but you know, like I just don't think a serious business will remain a serious business if loot boxes is their strategy to bring people in. So I take this as an example. So I want to buy a new toaster. So I go to Amazon and look up toasters on Amazon, and Amazon only sell loot box toasters or toaster loot boxes. So I pay $59.95 and I wait to see what will arrive at my door. Now it could be $120 Deloitte toaster, or it could be a $10 Kmart one. Now, that is just not a thing. That is not how a serious business runs. So I can't be like, who's going to be ordering toaster loot boxes on the off chance of whatever toaster you're going to get? Nobody, right? So that's not. And that was my argument with these people. And then I was told that I actually really needed to learn a little bit more about Web3 because clearly I didn't know very much about how fantastic loot boxes are. And indeed, in 2021, first half of 2022, and I've been involved in some launches and stuff that were around mystery boxes and stuff like that. And yes, people go absolutely nuts over them, and it's fun and it's playing and it's whatever, but not when you actually want to run a serious business longer term. So Nike cannot do this every week if they want to actually be properly in Web3. Now, at the moment, this is a tiny, tiny percentage of whatever it is that they, you know, turn over every week. And I just, yeah, that's just my argument. I've been on a bit of a hobby horse this week.
So I'm doing a bit of digging while you're chatting. For those who remember Gauntlet, Mike, you remember Gauntlet? When we were kids, there was a video game. This is going back to the 80s by Atari called Gauntlet. Like basically Dungeons and Dragons. And they didn't call them loot boxes, but they were treasure chests in there where you would get randomized weapons that you would find. And that this is considered generally in the gaming communities as the game that popularized. It didn't invent them, but it was the one that made loot boxes a thing. So they've been around a long time. Mike, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm going to take a completely 180 approach to this, and I'm going to push back heavily. Have you ever had a baseball card collection?
Oh, I have written in my article already. It's like Facebook cards, you know, are you going to get a Babe Ruth? I've compared it to is the Lego minifigure packets where Mr. Gold was the one that you wanted. And you know how many times I took my 5-year-old to the supermarket and he'd finger every single damn pack that was on the shelf. And then he'd go, I think it's this one. Let's buy this one. You know, 25 minifigure packs later, we still didn't have Mr. Gold. So yes, Mike,
that
I know.
proves the point that there is a sustainable business behind that theory. Is it gambling? No, because you're still receiving a product. The value of that product is up for debate. And frankly, that has been every NFT collection, including CEX. CEX has specific ones that are technically worth more and more valuable. They come with different utilities and therefore different benefits that you can get from owning specific ones. Every single one of these projects.
Mike, can't you choose?
No. You mint at a specific time and it is sent to you randomly. When it reveals, then there's your opening of your loot box. That has been
a good point.
Basically the forefront of every single NFT. But forget about Web3 for a second. Let's just stick to the basics of it. They made an entire Willy Wonka movie about a golden ticket that was found in a chocolate bar.
Charlie Buckets.
Yeah. And there would had to have been regulation around that. Because it was a lottery or whatever.
No. You're using the incorrect term. That is legal. Is weak. Okay? And
Mike's got internet, or is it my internet?
No, Mike, you're breaking up, Mike. I know that. I'll just comment real fast. When Gary Vaynerchuk issued the VFriends, there were different categories of NFTs that had different perks, including going to games with Gary or dinners, etc. And the buyer got to choose. You paid more for certain features.
That's correct.
So that's clearly not a loot box, quote unquote. But when it's randomized, it becomes a contest between coding and programming. And like baseball card packs, they were the company that makes them, Topps or whomever, didn't stock them into the stores when you walked in. But in a game, they literally stock, you know, like the way you go to Amazon as a website and you see whatever they want you to see on their website because of algorithms. That's how loot boxes can work.
In a way, look, I'm guessing that there's not way to manipulate them and to make certain people certain things. There totally is that strategy or that policy that could be put in place. But if you treat it as a sweepstakes, where basically you are put into a bucket, and if your number gets picked out of that bucket, then you get X amount of product or service. The value of that product or service is now up for the open market. That's the Web3 component of this, right? So, for example, there's people that have those specialty CEX and ETs, right? So there's some that introduce keynote speakers. There's some that don't. You can see that in the meta. It actually describes that was one of the unboxing experiences that most people loved about NFTs. You didn't know what you were going to get. You're going to same amount for everybody up front on the front end, and then at the back end of the reveal, oh my goodness, I lucked out. I got this mythic character that's worth more. I got this more rare NFT that's more valuable. It provides different utility, therefore different services. Therefore, I can turn around as the owner of that asset and now monetize more than you who paid the same amount for a different item.
But in terms of the CEX NFTs, there was a base thing that everyone was buying it for, and that was a ticket to the annual event for as long as Joe Paluzzi held the event. So I paid the money for my ticket just because of that.
And
right?
Nike,
if I got
you are
something
guaranteed
else
to get a digital pair of shoes, right? You're guaranteed to at least get a digital pair of shoes
that's
that
correct.
are issued by Nike.
Yes,
it's the same exact model. Now there's rarities and different types of valuables built into it, but that's all part of the gamification. right? That's what makes people excited. That's what makes kids excited to say, hey, I'm going to open up this new pack of Pokemon cards because I might get this super special one. I mean, we laugh, but that is a legitimate sustainable business.
But Mike, let's combine that with algorithms. If I happen to be a big spender in the NFT world of whatever Nike's, they know I buy $50,000 sneakers all the time, and I can then theoretically be faced with 10 times the number of loot box potentials as you. Or if I never click on loot boxes, then it doesn't bother me.
Well, that's why Web3 puts safety guards in place for that. They limit the amount of tokens that people are able to access per wallet. They make limitations on maximum number. Where people who spend a tremendous amount of money on NFT not get the most rare ones in the collections, right? They just don't fall on their lap. All of that is determined way before everybody starts buying. So because people are buying simultaneously, you don't know where people are going to end up with those specific tokens or not. But the unboxing experience is really what the key component of that business is.
So do you think then that only businesses who are going to do a loot box strategy will be in Web3?
No, not at all.
Right.
But I think it's a very large component of it.
Right now it might be, but my argument is that ultimately when the children, and we have talked about them many, many times, those people that started in Web3 and, those that bought the Bored Apes at $600 or CryptoPunks at $200 and, made millions of dollars and never sold anything and lost it all when it crashed. All of those people who love loot boxes and all of that kind of stuff, they buy that. When they're not the majority of businesses or people within Web3, I do not think loot boxes will be the main strategy that drives interest and onboarding as an activity. I just don't believe that will be long-term, will be the way this space works.
I totally disagree with you because it's a marketing play at that point too. Because, you're adding a different element that engagement more validated. It gets people interested in understanding why coming back for more. Right? Is it gambling? No, it's not gambling. You're not buying a lottery ticket that you're gonna you hit the millions. You're buying into a project for a specific reason. If you're buying a project just for the rares, then you're fishing. You're fishing for a blue whale using a straw.
But Mike,
I don't think half the people who bought the Nike loot boxes are interested in what friggin' pair of sneakers they get at all. I think that they're like, ooh, I might get one that's whatever.
There's that possibility.
It cost me $19.82, and I'm going to spend $100 and buy, these loot boxes and hope that I'll be able to sell them for $10,000. Like,
okay, so let's use a very simple process.
Why do we want people like that in this space?
So didn't pay attention of it, maybe not, but I'll use Linda and hope she pops into Twitter Spaces to discuss this after. When we introduced Unforeseen Project, okay, the same basic path you got the customs, but everybody's path looked the same. It was all of the dice, what team you meant nothing at the given moment. Then you were issued 5 random cards. You didn't know what you're gonna get. It was randomized. Built into that was rarity structure. There was rare backgrounds, there were alternate logos, there were all these different components which add the gamification side of it. There were people on the hunt for those specific items, but the base point of being there, participate in this unique fantasy football league. So game marketing strategy, and if brands embrace that marketing strategy, that component of Web3 isn't going anywhere. We saw Mitzi do it, and he didn't even realize what he was doing.
How many extra unfantasy cards did I buy, Mike? And this might give you the reason as to why I don't like loot boxes.
I'm going to guess none.
He didn't even realize that was a loot box. I just brought that up as an example now. All I'm
I
trying to
bought,
explain,
yeah, but I didn't.
Michelle, how many
I didn't buy it because of
NFTs
that,
are you?
though.
How many NFTs do you own?
Oh, I don't know. 10, maybe.
10. Okay. Of what projects?
Some of them, most of the ones I own are either given to me because of something, your unfantasy, and I've got a couple of art pieces because I actually just like the art. That's the only reason.
Okay. Or did you buy it secondary?
I bought them secondary.
Okay, so you're completely eliminated from the gamification items through the mint. And that's exactly what is relying on. The mint product creates the element where you're going to receive this token. After an X amount of period of time, those tokens are revealed. You don't know you're getting. That's the mystery box. That's the Christmas of the tree. That's something that every single birthday or whatever, they can tap into some component of their brain, makes them excited to know what they're going to get. And then they turn around and try to add value proposition on what that component is, and therefore turn around to sell that on an open market.
I am not buying a toaster loot box from Amazon.
I feel like that's not the best example to give, because it's not like a mystery case that purchasing for money you're going into based around the project. That's the whole damn reason about what.
Oh, sure. Yeah, sure. But if we're talking about wanting to onboard people with businesses, whether they be, advertising or media or content creators or artists or whatever, they're actually about the quality pieces of information or services or products they produce. They would like to find new avenues or new ways of selling them. And we're saying Web3 could be one of those things. If we're talking about B2B. So as business owners, and, how are we going to explain to people that they can, be at the forefront of the next revolution of the internet, like some of us were with Web 2.
Okay.
And there is no way most of those people will jump on board that with their little 5-person creator business or marketing thing. If you go, oh, well, and by the way, you need to have loot boxes as part of your marketing strategy, or no one will ever pay any attention to you.
It's not
or nothing. I'm just suggesting that it's a marketing strategy, right? I'm going to bring
kind of dates
the show.
Okay. Use our nutrition
as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Starting membership
in the form of
tokens,
and there's rarity
components associated with those rare easily valuing utility products
in the nutrition store.
Right. I got the one with protein powder brand. I get 10% off that one because I own this one. Well, I don't use that one. I use another one. Let me hunt down that token so I can get my hands on that one. There's strategies in play that could easily become marketing. We see this happen with marketing all the time. We just call it loot boxes in this new definition. How many
you walk into a store or you open
times you walk into a store or you open up your weekly tabloids and you see a little scratch ticket? A scratch ticket is the same thing. Okay, you didn't pay for anything, but you have the potential to win it. Now, if you have a coin nearby, you're curious and you're going to tap into that curiosity. That's a business collaboration. That's a business development, and that's a marketing strategy. I think it's brilliant, and I think that Web3 highlighted on how hungry people are for that type of stuff.
Yeah.
But the thing is too, Mike, like I've got first-hand experience of things like this type of thing, or say Gleam.io contest, which is like a raffle. You put up a prize money and people have to follow your Twitter and give you their email address and whatever, and you give them, 20 tickets in the thing to win, 10,000 tokens of your thing. So I've been involved with a project that, we grew the list from 3,000 to 14,000 people because we ran this type of thing. And they were like 9,999 of them were only in it to see if they could win this contest. And they're gone and they're not interacting with the brand anymore. So my point about this is that these sorts of things, people who are in it for only what they can get out of it is not what we should be aspiring this space to be over the long term.
Totally disagree with you on that. You want to capture people's attention. You want to formulate strategy, interact, and create engagement.
If this is the strategy, this is no different from, hey, sign up for my newsletter and gain access to the content that I'm pumping out. It's the exact same model.
So I'm going to say two things. Number one, the realities of business are that this not getting regulated anytime soon, it appears. So it's going to be used the way Mike says. Whether or not it should be, Michelle, you're a completely valid point there. And I think a lot of parents are concerned about that, with specifically the children. There is something to be said, Mike, even if that works, the whole dopamine addiction thing, there's a similarity here to how Web 2 social platforms became so addictive for these kids. And I'm not saying...
And bad. For a lot of them,
it's as bad as like drinking and driving. Like there's a risk. Go ahead.
No, bad guy. This sense.
It's not just this episode, Mike.
Wait till his kids are 10 years older, Mark.
Right. Keep going, Mike.
Listen, social media thrives on the addiction of affirmation. It's a completely different dopamine, but the mystery concept is time. Okay, that dates back forever. Okay, again, there's a chance you're gonna that business is arguably bigger now than back then.
Yeah, I agree. I'm saying, like, the realities of business are it's been working and it's going to continue to be used. But Michelle raises the moral point of, like, there is a factor here where kids aren't aware of what's being put against them.
But also, my other point, though, is that what my base of this is, for the space to grow, to be beneficial to people who run real businesses, it cannot only be onboarding people via this type of marketing. There has to be other ways. There has to be other stuff. Unfortunately, right at this moment, these are the types of things that are getting the attention. Now, any attention, I guess, on the space is good. So, I'm sure this has been in the Financial Times and it'll be on CNBC in the mornings and all of that stuff. So people will go, oh, gee, I wonder what that is. Great. But
it shows too. Again, doesn't understand what they're being shoveled in their face every day. And it's just highlighted based around what we're seeing in this particular space here. Does it need to be an all in or nothing scenario? No, I totally agree with you on that. But I think it is an extremely valid strategy that should be put into play because the technology, number one, allows it. And number two, it's a proven model that showcases engagement. And if you're trying to build a brand, building engagement in any way, shape, or form is critical. Absolutely critical.
Agreed. So go ahead, Michelle. We want to respond?
I was going to say we have talked personally and, in other forums, not necessarily on this show, although we have talked about the 1,000 true fan thing. I would rather have 1,000 true fans in Web3 than 100,000 people who are only in it for whatever loot thing or whatever they can get out of it. And that's part of the problem. Like we have, like I'm in forums or chat groups or Discords or whatever, and people go, oh, the token price is tanked or the liquidity's no good on whatever. You need to put some money into it in order to make it better for me, they say. And it's like, well, you could put some liquidity in, or, like they're only in it for what they can get out of it only as a whole thing. And there's too many of those people. I mean, there's people like us who actually, yes, we make money and all of that. But we also want to advance this space because we're actually committed to it and we understand it and we want it to be, live up to its potential if you for want of a better phrase. But there are.
I'm going to send you a present wrapped in wrapping.
To bring this full circle, this is the whole purpose of the Web 3x3 podcast we do here is exactly that, Michelle, to raise awareness and educate folks on the space. I agree with you that there's It's definitely a controversial thing, but Mike has got a point in that it does bring people into the space. Now, are they the right people, and is that the right intent? I think I agree with you, Michelle, that no, it's not. But in any
Are they
event,
the same people? You know, is
They're
it the
not-
same 10,000 people buying all of these things over all of these different projects?
but the companies that are
Not
going to
at
do
all.
it, like Nike, are making $1 million every 2 weeks right now. And so that's this. We can expect this to continue, which, by the way, this is a business discussion and is not meant in any way, shape, or form as investment advice. However, I think we can bank on the fact that these big companies, now that they see the money involved here, and this is a new marketing channel. Let's be honest. That's what we've recognized and it's what we preach. This whole Web3 thing has legs, obviously, and now it's got money to it. And whether or not it's controversial with this whole loot boxes approach, I think we see more of it.
Maybe.
It's new. So why it's getting the attention it's getting now?
Well, it's not new in terms of the concept's been around. I agree with you 100%, Mike. But it is new that it's brought this kind of money, even back in the Atari.
Know how? Look at the history of how much money NFTs have brought in. Every single one of those classified as a loot box,
But
according
Mike,
to this type of definition.
your baseball card example is a good one. When Topps is rolling out, potentially you can get Greg Nettles or whoever the baseball player is. Then are you buying those baseball cards because of that, or is that just kind of an extra cool gimme in case he's in there?
As a Yankee fan, I only want Yankee players. When I that does not. This is doesn't target a different type of way of looking at it, therefore implementing a specific marketing strategy. You hype up what is in the bucket, what you potentially could get out of it. There's reasons for
even
that.
you must admit that it opens the door for potential abuse, right? Because with
We've
baseball,
seen that every way, shape, or form. We've seen counterfeit baseball cards created, right? You're never going to have a perfect system that does not have that type of abuse.
well,
Ever.
yeah, the system that can't be abused, like blockchain, doesn't get abused. A system that can be always does. So, for example, Mike, you're a Yankees fan. If I know you're a Yankees fan, and I know I dangle Thurman Munson or Greg Nettles or one of these, Reggie Jackson in front of you as a potential loot box guy in your baseball card collection, these are big names for his team, folks. Then you would be all right. I'm going to open up these. I'm going to pay the money because I could potentially get something cool here. But if you know it's going to be, I don't know, the Red Sox players. Ted, what's his face? Like, you're not going to open it, is my point. I can drive your behavior.
Disagree with every single one of these arguments. I do not agree with any of it. I think that there is a valid argument wholeheartedly on why these things work in every capacity, including Web3. Okay. If I buy tickets to a baseball game and it turns out to be a perfect game, guess what? I opened the loot box on something that was magical. If it was a 15-2 blowout, I got fucked.
I think that is not the same at all.
It's exactly the same
No,
thing. It's the
it is
user
not.
experience based
No,
around what you put
that's-
into it. You don't know what it's going to
That
be.
is bullshit. It is
No,
not
it's
the
not
same.
at all, man. Okay, listen, Michelle, mint more than 10 items, and then we can have this discussion. Go and mint a project. Exactly is what it is.
Okay, in an effort to settle the debate.
No. I'm not. Now, don't get me wrong. I know that they're fun. And it's not that I don't like them as a thing. I don't like them being used at the moment and over the last 12 to 18 months as the thing that creates the FOMO and the hype and the whatever that gets people taking Bored Ape Yacht Club monkey pictures from $600 to a couple of $1 million. Now everyone's left holding these stupid things for 1/10 of what they paid for it or 1/100th of what they paid for it. And all of that stuff I just don't like how the reputation of this space right now is around that stuff. Mike's still on Twitter. he's
So
yeah,
I'm going to say,
no, your video's gone. That's all.
For the folks listening, if you enjoy spirited debates that border into arguments, please follow us on the Web 3x3 LinkedIn page. and Twitter Spaces. As the voice of reason, I'm going to say that this episode is sponsored by Invictus Communication, where you can revolutionize your digital presence. So here's what I'll say. In wrapping up, our 3 stories this week, the focus has been, can we blockchain government spending, right? This is about the power of blockchain being used in government spaces for accountability. Mike, that was your article. Michelle had a great piece clearly around loot boxes and whether or not these things should and could be used in ways that will grow the space or damage the space. And I just wanted to shine a light on Nike doing that exact thing to raise $1 million in 2 weeks. So it's in play, whether we like it or not. I think that, right.
Let's just.
I think the role
Clearly-
here, Mike, it's not whether
Clearly-
or not we decide it's right or wrong. It's that we're bringing attention to the fact that it's happening, right? That's what this purpose of this show is that blockchain is, it's opening up new conversations and new ways for people to make money in ways that, yes, traditionally that's gone way back. I agree with you. It's not new, but the new applications of it, which are sometimes controversial, are things that people should be considering. They're going to look at this. When Nike does it and it makes a big money, you can bet the competitors will too. I think the gaming world has not opposed loot boxes, right? The players I'm talking. So, yeah, I mean, there's going to be controversy in everything. 2 sides to every coin. But I think that we're continuing to shine a light on the fact that this is a new way of taking a look at how businesses are being run, and maybe this tool is here to run your business in this manner. Final thoughts, Mike, Michelle. We'll start with you,
Mike's
Michelle.
not on the video anymore, so we're going to have to relay his thoughts for the video if we want to do that. We will end the video shortly, and then we'll go to Twitter Spaces. So if you're on Twitter Spaces and listening to us now, then we can continue the discussion for a bit after we finish. My final thought then is that I just don't want loot boxes to be the way that everyone who runs a business who wants to enter this space feels like they need to do it in order to get any attention. I want us to be better than that.
Mike, response?
That is proven to be effective since the dawn of time. And I think implementing strategies that we know work in new technologies has proven to make that technology evolve faster.
Great. Love it. All right. I'm going to thank everyone for tuning in. Please give us a follow. Web3x3 on LinkedIn. We are heading over to Twitter Spaces for any Q&A or any conversation you guys would like to partake in. Please feel free. Thank you very much. I'm signing off the video. See you on Twitter.